At the luxury gala, the billionaire CEO humiliated the black waitress until the FBI walked in. Why did the FBI walk into the luxury gala at that exact moment? What unexpected turn could unfold after such a public humiliation? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We're thrilled to have you here for another unforgettable story filled with suspense, emotion, and surprising twists. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss any of our latest stories. Thank you for your continued support and for being part of this amazing community. We truly appreciate every one of you. Now we'd love to hear from you. If you witness someone being publicly humiliated, how do you think the situation should be handled? With that thought in mind, let's step into today's compelling story and discover how everything begins. People rarely reveal who they truly are when they stand beside power. They reveal themselves when they stand over someone who seems powerless. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm golden light across the grand ballroom of the Monarch Crescent Hotel in downtown Chicago, where nearly 500 guests in tailored tuxedos and designer gowns gathered beneath soaring ceilings to celebrate the annual Brooks Meridian Foundation Charity Gala. Every polished marble floor reflected elegance. Every orchestra note floated through the room with effortless sophistication. Television crews moved quietly between tables, capturing the faces of influential entrepreneurs, respected philanthropists, politicians, and financial leaders whose combined fortunes could reshape entire industries. At the center of it all stood Nathaniel Brooks, the 51-year-old billionaire founder and chief executive officer of Brooks Meridian Holdings. Wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit and a silver watch that subtly reflected the ballroom lights, he greeted investors with the relaxed confidence of a man accustomed to commanding every room he entered. Conversations paused whenever he approached. Cameras naturally turned toward him. Employees watched every gesture, hoping to earn a nod of approval. Only a few feet away, 28-year-old Zaria Carter moved quietly through the crowd, wearing a spotless black waitress apron over a neatly pressed white shirt. She carried a polished silver tray with practiced balance, greeting every guest with genuine courtesy while remaining almost invisible among the luxury surrounding her. She noticed empty glasses before anyone asked. She anticipated requests before they were spoken. Her professionalism blended so naturally into the evening that few people bothered to look at her face. They saw only the uniform. As Nathaniel accepted another glass of champagne while discussing a future technology investment with several board members, one guest unexpectedly stepped backward to greet an arriving senator. The sudden movement forced Zaria to shift her balance in a fraction of a second. A few drops of champagne splashed onto the sleeve of Nathaniel's expensive jacket. Silence arrived almost instantly. The orchestra continued playing, but nearby conversations disappeared. Cameras instinctively turned toward the unexpected interruption. Zaria lowered the tray and immediately spoke with calm sincerity. "I am very sorry, sir. That was an accident." Nathaniel slowly looked down at the tiny droplets on his sleeve before lifting his eyes toward the waitress. His expression hardened. "Do you have any idea how much this jacket costs?" he asked loudly enough for dozens of nearby guests to hear. Zaria remained composed. "No, sir, but I sincerely apologize." Nathaniel gave a short, dismissive laugh. "Of course you don't. Someone serving drinks could never understand what excellence looks like." A few uncomfortable smiles spread through the surrounding crowd. Others looked away. No one spoke. Nathaniel took another step forward, making sure every nearby camera could capture the moment. "Maybe next time you should remember that events like this require professionals." Zaria never raised her voice. She simply held the tray steadily and answered, "Everyone deserves respect, sir, regardless of their job." For a brief moment, even the orchestra seemed quieter. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Security," he called without taking his eyes off her. "Escort her out before she ruins the rest of the evening." Two hotel security officers hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances before beginning to walk toward the waitress. Zarya neither argued nor pleaded. She stood with quiet dignity, her hands steady despite hundreds of eyes fixed upon her. Then, before either officer could reach her, the massive ballroom doors opened with deliberate precision. Every conversation stopped. Every camera turned. Several men and women wearing dark business attire stepped inside, displaying official credentials that immediately commanded attention. The woman leading them scanned the silent ballroom before speaking in a calm, unmistakably authoritative voice. Federal Bureau of Investigation. No one leaves this room until further notice. No one expected the next question to matter more than every speech delivered that evening. The ballroom remained perfectly still as the agents spread calmly through the room with quiet confidence, positioning themselves near each exit without creating panic. Their professionalism carried a weight that no raised voice ever could. Nathaniel Brooks adjusted his jacket, recovering the composed smile that had helped him negotiate billion-dollar agreements for decades. He stepped forward with an outstretched hand, assuming the interruption must involve one of Brooks Meridian Holdings' recent partnerships with federal agencies. "Good evening," he said politely. "I am Nathaniel Brooks. If there is anything my team can do to assist, please let me know." The woman leading the group acknowledged him with a brief nod, but did not shake his hand. Her attention continued scanning the ballroom until her eyes stopped on the young waitress still standing quietly beside the silver serving tray. "Special Agent Olivia Hayes, Federal Bureau of Investigation," she said clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We are looking for Zarya Carter." A ripple of confusion swept across the ballroom. Guests exchanged uncertain glances. Several reporters lowered their cameras for a moment, trying to understand why a federal investigation would involve someone who had been serving drinks only seconds earlier. Nathaniel looked from the agent to Zarya with visible disbelief before speaking again. "There must be some misunderstanding," he said. "She is a member of the hotel staff." Olivia Hayes remained calm. "Is that Ms. Zarya Carter?" she asked while looking directly at the waitress. Zarya met her gaze without hesitation. "Yes, ma'am. I am Zarya Carter." The special agent gave a respectful nod. "Thank you. Please remain exactly where you are." The two security officers who had been approaching Zarya stopped immediately after noticing the credentials displayed by the federal agents. Neither officer seemed certain what to do next. Nathaniel frowned slightly. "If this concerns one of my guests, perhaps we should continue this conversation privately." Olivia turned toward him with the same measured professionalism. "Mr. Brooks, everyone will remain here for the moment. We need to preserve the current environment until we complete several preliminary procedures." Her words carried neither accusation nor reassurance. They simply carried authority. Around the ballroom, conversations resumed only as quiet whispers. Investors who had confidently discussed mergers minutes earlier now watched every movement made by the agents. Hotel executives exchanged nervous looks with one another. Even the orchestra had stopped playing, leaving only the soft sound of air conditioning flowing through the enormous room. Nathaniel folded his hands in front of him, maintaining the appearance of confidence, although uncertainty had begun to replace his earlier certainty. He glanced briefly toward Ethan Cole, his longtime chief financial officer, who forced a careful smile that seemed more practiced than natural. Ethan responded with a subtle shrug, as though he knew nothing more than anyone else. Olivia Hayes removed a slim folder from her briefcase, but did not open it. Instead, she addressed the room once more. "This is a federal matter. We appreciate your cooperation. No conclusions should be drawn from our presence until the facts have been properly established." Her statement eased no one's curiosity. Every eye returned to Zarya. She still stood quietly in her black waitress apron with both hands resting lightly against the serving tray, showing neither fear nor surprise. Nathaniel studied her face for the first time that evening instead of seeing only the uniform she wore. The confidence in her expression did not belong to someone caught in unexpected trouble. It belonged to someone who had been waiting for this moment far longer than anyone else inside the ballroom could possibly imagine. Truth rarely announces itself with noise. More often, it waits quietly while pride speaks first. The silence inside the Monarch Crescent Hotel ballroom became heavier with every passing second as hundreds of distinguished guests watched Special Agent Olivia Hayes take a slow step towards Zaria Carter. There was no urgency in her movement, only quiet confidence shaped by years of experience. She stopped a respectful distance away before offering a small, reassuring smile. "Miss Carter, thank you for remaining here," she said. "For your protection and to preserve the integrity of an active federal investigation, I would like you to stay with us for the next few minutes." Zaria answered with the same calm professionalism she had shown throughout the evening. "Of course, Agent Hayes." The response surprised nearly everyone in the room. There was no panic in her voice, no confusion, no attempt to ask unnecessary questions. She sounded like someone who already understood why the Federal Bureau of Investigation had arrived. Nathaniel Brooks watched the exchange with growing uncertainty. Only moments earlier, he had viewed the young waitress as an unfortunate interruption to an otherwise flawless evening. Now federal agents were treating her with visible respect while speaking to one of the most powerful business leaders in the country with formal neutrality. It was a reversal that made no immediate sense. Ethan Cole stepped closer to Nathaniel and lowered his voice. "This is probably a misunderstanding," he whispered. "Someone may have confused her identity with another employee." Nathaniel nodded slightly, but the explanation did not settle the uneasy feeling beginning to grow inside him. Across the ballroom, two agents quietly approached the hotel's security manager and requested immediate access to surveillance recordings covering the entrance, service hallways, ballroom floor, and executive reception lounge. Another agent politely asked the event coordinator to preserve the complete guest registration records and seating assignments. Every request was made calmly, respectfully, and without accusation, yet each instruction carried unmistakable authority. Television crews sensed the significance of the moment and continued recording from a respectful distance. Luxury gala coverage had unexpectedly transformed into the beginning of something far more important. Guests who had arrived expecting speeches about philanthropy now found themselves witnessing the careful first steps of a federal investigation. Nathaniel walked toward Agent Hayes once again, keeping his voice measured. "Agent Hayes, I fully respect your responsibilities. However, as the host of this event, I would appreciate some understanding of what is taking place." Olivia looked directly at him before answering. "Mr. Brooks, at this time we are verifying evidence connected to an ongoing financial investigation. Until those procedures are complete, I cannot discuss specific details." Nathaniel accepted the answer with a polite nod, although his expression revealed growing frustration. He had spent decades building influence that usually opened every door. Tonight, influence accomplished nothing. His attention shifted back to Zaria. She remained beside the serving station, still wearing the same black waitress apron that had caused so many people to overlook her only minutes earlier. Several guests who had laughed after Nathaniel's public criticism now avoided meeting her eyes. Others quietly wondered how someone serving drinks at a luxury gala had earned the confidence of federal investigators. Agent Hayes finally turned toward Zaria once more. "Ms. Carter, thank you for your patience. Everything is proceeding exactly as expected." Zaria gave a slight nod. "I understand." Those three simple words echoed through Nathaniel's thoughts. Exactly as expected. The phrase suggested preparation rather than coincidence, purpose rather than accident. For the first time that evening, Nathaniel realized the woman he had dismissed so easily might know far more about the events unfolding inside his ballroom than he did. And somewhere behind the calm expressions of the federal agents, a truth was steadily moving closer to the surface. Respect can be earned in a single moment. but the truth that creates it is often hidden for years. Every eye inside the Monarch Crescent Hotel ballroom followed Special Agent Olivia Hayes as she accepted a sealed evidence envelope from another agent who had quietly returned from the hotel security office. She opened the folder with deliberate care, briefly reviewing several documents before closing it again. There was no dramatic announcement, only the steady confidence of someone allowing verified facts to speak for themselves. Nathaniel Brooks watched closely, his expression becoming more serious with every passing second. The confidence that had defined him throughout the evening was beginning to fade beneath a growing need for answers. "Agent Hayes," he said evenly, "if Brooks Meridian Holdings has information that may assist your investigation, my legal department will cooperate completely." Olivia acknowledged the statement with a respectful nod. "Your cooperation is appreciated, Mr. Brooks. At this stage, our priority is protecting an individual who has lawfully assisted an active federal investigation over an extended period." A wave of whispers spread through the ballroom. Nathaniel slowly turned toward Zaria Carter. She remained exactly where she had been standing, her black waitress apron still neatly tied, her posture calm, her expression unchanged despite becoming the center of attention. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Only minutes earlier she had been viewed as someone whose presence barely mattered. Now every influential guest in the room was watching her instead of the billionaire who had hosted the evening. Nathaniel spoke carefully. "Protected? You are saying she has been working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Olivia answered without hesitation. "Ms. Carter has acted within the law and has demonstrated exceptional integrity throughout an ongoing financial investigation. Beyond that, I cannot discuss confidential details at this time." The words landed with enormous weight. Integrity. The description echoed through the ballroom more powerfully than any accusation could have. Several business leaders exchanged thoughtful glances. Reporters quietly adjusted their camera angles toward Zaria. Hotel employees who had worked beside her for months looked at one another with expressions of genuine surprise. Ethan Cole folded his arms while forcing a composed smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Surely there has been some misunderstanding," he said. "She serves tables. I cannot imagine how she would become involved in a federal financial investigation." Agent Hayes looked directly at him before responding. "People often underestimate those they choose not to notice. Our investigations rely on evidence, not job titles." The brief reply silenced him immediately. Nathaniel felt those words more deeply than he cared to admit. He remembered every dismissive sentence he had spoken only minutes earlier. Each one now seemed increasingly small against the quiet dignity standing across the room. Olivia continued speaking, addressing everyone present rather than any single individual. "Financial crimes are rarely uncovered by the loudest voices. They are often exposed by observant people who refuse to ignore facts simply because others overlook them." Zaria lowered her eyes briefly, uncomfortable with the attention but making no effort to deny the agent's remarks. She neither smiled nor appeared proud. She simply remained respectful, as though this evening had never been about recognition. Nathaniel studied her with entirely different eyes than before. For the first time, he wondered not who she appeared to be, but who she had always been. Before anyone could ask another question, another federal agent approached Olivia and quietly handed her a secure electronic tablet displaying newly verified information. She reviewed the screen for several silent seconds, then closed the cover and looked toward the guests with calm determination. "The preliminary verification is complete," she announced. "The next stage of this investigation concerns evidence connected to someone inside this ballroom, and we now know exactly where that evidence leads. The strongest lies are not the ones people tell. They are the ones successful people never think to question." A heavy stillness settled over the Monarch Crescent Hotel ballroom after Special Agent Olivia Hayes announced that the evidence now pointed to someone inside the room. Hundreds of distinguished guests instinctively looked from one familiar face to another, searching for signs that might explain the dramatic turn the evening had taken. Nathaniel Brooks remained perfectly still, his thoughts racing faster than his expression allowed anyone to see. For decades, he had trusted careful judgment, disciplined leadership, and loyal executives to protect everything he had built. Tonight, for the first time in many years, certainty had completely disappeared. Olivia Hayes glanced toward another federal agent, who quietly placed a secure laptop on a nearby banquet table. Several documents appeared on the screen, followed by transaction summaries, internal approval records, and authenticated financial timelines. The information was displayed only to the investigative team, yet everyone in the ballroom understood that months, perhaps years, of careful work stood behind those files. Olivia finally spoke. This investigation concerns a pattern of financial irregularities involving charitable distributions, vendor payments, and unauthorized transfers that crossed multiple jurisdictions. Every conclusion has been supported by verified documentation. Nathaniel listened carefully, immediately recognizing several project names connected to Brooks Meridian Holdings. His expression tightened. Those initiatives had always been reviewed through his executive leadership team before reaching his desk. He had personally insisted on strict compliance procedures. He turned toward Ethan Cole. "You supervise these financial reports," Nathaniel said quietly. Ethan answered without hesitation. Every report was independently audited. There is nothing unusual about routine adjustments between subsidiaries. His voice remained calm, but the confidence sounded rehearsed rather than natural. Olivia looked toward Ethan before continuing. "Routine adjustments are not the subject of this investigation. The concern involves a deliberate pattern of concealed authorization changes that redirected funds through intermediary accounts while creating the appearance of legitimate executive approval." Several board members exchanged uneasy glances. Nathaniel frowned. "Executive approval?" Olivia nodded once. "Yes, Mr. Brooks. Many of these transactions appear to carry your authorization. Our investigation indicates that appearance may not reflect reality." Nathaniel's eyes returned to the documents displayed on the screen. The signatures resembled his own. The approval chains matched official company procedures. Even the dates corresponded with genuine corporate meetings. Yet something about the sequence felt wrong. He had no memory of approving several of the listed transactions. Before he could speak again, Olivia turned toward Zaria Carter. "Ms. Carter first noticed inconsistencies nearly 2 years ago while working evening shifts during recurring executive events held at this hotel. She repeatedly observed conversations, discarded meeting materials, scheduling patterns, and payment references that did not align with publicly reported business activity. Rather than making assumptions, she carefully documented only what she personally witnessed and lawfully provided that information after being contacted during our investigation." The ballroom became completely silent once more. Nathaniel looked at Zaria with astonishment. She had never searched for attention. She had never attempted to confront executives or attract publicity. She had simply observed, remembered, and respected the truth. Olivia continued. "Her information did not establish guilt. It established direction. Every fact was independently verified before becoming evidence." Nathaniel slowly lowered his eyes. The woman he had dismissed as invisible had demonstrated the patience, integrity, and responsibility expected from the very leaders gathered inside his own ballroom. Across the room, Ethan Cole quietly loosened his tie and forced another controlled smile. But a single drop of perspiration appeared along his forehead as one more federal agent entered the ballroom, carrying a sealed evidence case that had just arrived from the United States Attorney's Office. Justice does not always arrive with flashing lights. Sometimes it arrives with a single verified fact that no amount of influence can erase. The arrival of the sealed evidence case transformed the atmosphere inside the Monarch Crescent Hotel ballroom from uncertainty into quiet expectation. Special Agent Olivia Hayes accepted the case, confirmed the security seal in full view of the investigative team, and carefully removed several authenticated documents. Every movement reflected procedure rather than performance. No one rushed. No one raised a voice. The evidence carried enough weight without dramatic presentation. Nathaniel Brooks stood motionless as Olivia placed one document beside another on the nearby table. Although the guests could not read the contents, they could clearly recognize official certifications, financial records, and legal authorizations. Olivia finally addressed the room. The evidence collected during this investigation has now been independently verified by multiple federal agencies and financial specialists. Our objective has always been to establish facts, not assumptions. She turned toward Nathaniel with professional respect. Mr. Brooks, based on the evidence presently available, our investigation has found no indication that you personally directed or knowingly approved the unauthorized financial activities under review. A wave of relieved whispers swept across the ballroom. Nathaniel slowly released a breath he had not realized he had been holding. The burden that had silently settled upon his shoulders moments earlier became lighter, yet the relief lasted only an instant. Olivia continued before anyone else could speak. However, the investigation has also confirmed that your executive authority was repeatedly misrepresented through manipulated approval records and unauthorized administrative actions carried out by another individual. Every face instinctively turned toward Ethan Cole. The chief financial officer remained standing beside the reception table, maintaining a composed posture that now appeared increasingly fragile. Nathaniel looked directly at the man who had managed the financial operations of Brooks Meridian Holdings for more than a decade. "Ethan," he said quietly, "tell me this is not true." Ethan hesitated for the first time that evening. His confident smile disappeared, replaced by an expression that searched unsuccessfully for an explanation capable of overcoming months of documented evidence. "Nathaniel, there are reasonable explanations for complex financial procedures," he replied carefully. "Some transactions appear different when viewed without full corporate context." Olivia calmly opened another folder. "The complete corporate context has been examined," she answered. "Every questioned transaction has been reviewed alongside electronic authorization logs, communication records, independent audits, and testimony from multiple witnesses. The evidence consistently identifies the same pattern." Nathaniel lowered his eyes for a brief moment before looking toward Zaria Carter once again. She had never accused anyone publicly. She had never attempted to embarrass anyone. She had simply trusted that careful observation, honesty, and patience would eventually allow the truth to emerge through lawful investigation. Olivia continued addressing the guests. Ms. Carter never sought recognition. In fact, she repeatedly asked that her identity remain confidential while the investigation proceeded. Her concern was not personal attention. Her concern was protecting the integrity of the evidence. Those words echoed through the silent ballroom with extraordinary force. Nathaniel remembered every dismissive remark he had spoken only an hour earlier. The contrast between his public judgment and Zaria's quiet integrity became impossible to ignore. He had measured her value by a uniform instead of her character. Olivia carefully closed the evidence folder before speaking once more. "Based on the completed verification process, the Federal Bureau of Investigation will now proceed with the next authorized stage of this investigation." Several agents calmly stepped toward Ethan Cole, identifying themselves and informing him that additional legal procedures would now follow in accordance with federal law. No voices were raised. No resistance occurred. Across the ballroom, every guest understood that the evening had permanently changed, and Nathaniel Brooks realized that the greatest mistake he had made was not trusting the wrong executive. It had been failing to recognize the extraordinary character of the woman he had chosen to humiliate before the truth quietly stood beside her. The moment we choose humility determines whether failure becomes the end of our story or the beginning of our character. The ballroom remained silent as the federal agents completed the next phase of their procedures with calm professionalism. No dramatic confrontation unfolded. No raised voices disturbed the dignity of the evening. The only sound came from quiet conversations between investigators and legal representatives as official documents were reviewed and acknowledged. Nathaniel Brooks stood where he had welcomed distinguished guests only an hour earlier, yet the room no longer looked the same through his eyes. The crystal chandeliers still shimmered above polished marble floors. The orchestra members still waited respectfully beside the stage, and elegantly dressed guests still filled the ballroom. But everything that had once symbolized influence now seemed insignificant compared to the lesson unfolding before him. He slowly turned toward Zaria Carter. She remained beside the serving station wearing the same neatly pressed white shirt and black waitress apron, showing the same quiet composure she had displayed from the beginning of the evening. She had not celebrated. She had not criticized anyone. She had not asked for recognition. Nathaniel walked toward her at an unhurried pace, every step watched by hundreds of guests and countless television cameras. The conversations faded until complete silence returned. He stopped a respectful distance away and spoke clearly enough for everyone present to hear. "Miss Carter, before anything else happens tonight, there is something I need to say." Zaria met his eyes without anger or satisfaction. She simply listened. Nathaniel drew a slow breath. "When you accidentally spilled a few drops of champagne on my jacket, I judged your worth by your uniform instead of your character. I spoke to you without the respect every person deserves. I embarrassed you in front of people whose opinions should never have mattered more than your dignity. I was wrong." No one moved. Several guests quietly lowered their eyes, remembering that they had witnessed the humiliation without speaking in her defense. Nathaniel continued, "I built my career believing I could recognize talent and integrity, yet tonight I failed the simplest test of leadership. I forgot that character cannot be measured by a job title, income, or appearance." Zaria answered gently, "Acknowledging a mistake takes courage, Mr. Brooks. I appreciate your honesty." Her response carried neither bitterness nor triumph. It reflected the same quiet strength that had guided every decision she had made throughout the investigation. Nathaniel nodded with sincere gratitude. "Thank you for showing more grace than I showed you." He then turned toward the audience gathered throughout the ballroom. "Everyone here witnessed my behavior earlier this evening. I cannot erase those words, but I can accept responsibility for them. Effective immediately, Brooks Meridian Holdings will begin an independent review of our leadership culture, our employee reporting systems, and the way every individual is treated regardless of position. Respect will no longer be considered optional. It will become an expectation." A quiet murmur of approval spread through the room. Several executives began applauding. The applause slowly grew until nearly every guest joined, not because a billionaire had spoken, but because accountability had replaced pride. Even the hotel employees standing near the ballroom entrance smiled with visible relief. Special Agent Olivia Hayes watched the scene with calm satisfaction. Justice had never been about public embarrassment. It had always been about allowing truth to restore fairness. As the applause gradually settled, one of the senior members of Brooks Meridian's board quietly stepped beside Nathaniel and handed him a folded document that had just been delivered by the company's legal counsel. Nathaniel opened it, read the first page, and his expression changed once again. What he had just learned suggested that Zaria Carter's connection to Brooks Meridian Holdings extended far beyond anything anyone inside the ballroom had imagined. Sometimes the greatest surprise is not discovering who someone is. It is discovering how long they have quietly carried a burden no one else ever noticed. Nathaniel Brooks lowered the document and looked towards Zaria Carter with genuine disbelief. The memorandum had been prepared by Brooks Meridian Holdings' legal department after an emergency review of archived corporate correspondence requested during the federal investigation. Years earlier, the company's confidential ethics reporting office had received several anonymous observations describing unusual scheduling patterns, inconsistent executive travel records, and financial details that deserved closer examination. The reports had never contained accusations. They had contained careful observations supported by dates, locations, and verifiable facts. They had been professionally written, remarkably consistent, and ultimately archived after being dismissed as incomplete because no one believed the source possessed meaningful corporate knowledge. During the federal investigation, handwriting comparisons, interview records, and preserved communication logs confirmed what no one had expected. The anonymous contributor had been Zaria Carter. Nathaniel slowly folded the document and approached her once again. "You tried to warn us years ago," he said quietly. Zaria answered with gentle honesty. "I tried to report only what I personally observed. I never wanted anyone to be unfairly accused. I only believed unusual facts deserved to be examined." Nathaniel shook his head with visible regret, and no one listened. She smiled softly. People were busy. They assumed a waitress could not possibly understand what she was seeing. "I accepted their decision and continued doing my job." Those words carried no resentment, only acceptance, and that quiet dignity affected the room more deeply than any emotional speech could have. Members of the board requested copies of the memorandum, while several senior executives quietly acknowledged that the company had overlooked valuable information simply because it came from someone outside the executive offices. Special Agent Olivia Hayes stepped forward and addressed everyone gathered in the ballroom. "One of the most important lessons from this investigation is that integrity has never depended upon professional titles. Reliable information can come from any honest individual willing to observe carefully and report responsibly." Ms. Carter demonstrated extraordinary patience by allowing the investigative process to follow the evidence rather than seeking personal recognition. Reporters continued recording every word. Many guests who had arrived expecting a glamorous charity celebration now realized they were witnessing a far more meaningful event. Nathaniel turned toward the audience once more. "Tonight, I learned that leadership is not measured by how many people recognize your name. Leadership is measured by whether you are willing to recognize the value in people whose names you have never bothered to learn." His words were followed by thoughtful silence before quiet applause gradually filled the ballroom again. This time the applause felt different. It was not celebrating success, wealth, or influence. It honored honesty, humility, and the courage to respect truth wherever it appeared. Nathaniel looked back at Zaria. "When this investigation is fully concluded, I hope you will allow Brooks Meridian Holdings the opportunity to learn from you. Not because you uncovered evidence, but because you demonstrated the character our organization should have recognized from the very beginning." Zaria answered with her usual calm. "If my experience helps people treat others with greater fairness, then something good has come from tonight." As those words settled over the ballroom, the atmosphere no longer reflected embarrassment or uncertainty. It reflected renewal. Yet before the evening could finally come to an end, Agent Hayes received one final message through her secure communication device. She read it, smiled with quiet satisfaction, and informed Nathaniel that the investigation had officially reached its conclusion, leaving only one final chapter that would determine how everyone would remember this extraordinary night. 3 months later, the night that had begun with public humiliation was remembered across Brooks Meridian Holdings for an entirely different reason. Newspapers no longer described it as a glamorous charity gala interrupted by a federal investigation. They described it as the evening when integrity quietly defeated assumption. Inside the company's headquarters overlooking downtown Chicago, Nathaniel Brooks stood before hundreds of employees gathered in the main atrium for the unveiling of a new corporate initiative. The polished glass walls reflected the morning sunlight, while journalists, community leaders, and members of the board filled the room with quiet anticipation. Behind Nathaniel stood a newly installed display bearing the words, "Respect every voice. Protect every truth." It was more than a slogan. It had become the foundation of a transformed company culture. Following recommendations from independent ethics consultants and the board of directors, Brooks Meridian Holdings had introduced anonymous reporting protections, expanded compliance training for every employee regardless of position, and established a direct ethics review committee that reported independently from executive management. Every employee, from custodial staff to senior executives, now received the same opportunity to raise concerns without fear of being ignored because of a job title. Nathaniel stepped to the podium and looked across the audience before speaking. Leadership is not the privilege of being heard first. Leadership is the responsibility of listening first. I learned that lesson from someone I failed to respect when I should have. He then invited Zaria Carter onto the stage. She was no longer wearing a waitress apron. Dressed in a simple navy business suit, she accepted the invitation with the same quiet humility that had defined her throughout every stage of the investigation. The applause that welcomed her was sincere and lasting because it honored character rather than celebrity. Nathaniel continued, "Ms. Carter has accepted our invitation to serve as an ethics and integrity advisor while continuing her own professional goals. She accepted only after insisting that every policy change benefit every employee equally. That decision tells you everything you need to know about her character." Zaria smiled gently before addressing the audience. No organization becomes stronger by pretending mistakes never happened. It becomes stronger when people choose honesty over pride and respect over assumption. I hope no employee here ever believes that a title determines whether their voice matters. Her words were followed by another standing ovation. Special Agent Olivia Hayes, attending as an invited guest, quietly congratulated both of them before leaving without seeking attention. Her work had never been about headlines. It had always been about allowing facts to speak with fairness. As the ceremony concluded, Nathaniel unveiled one final addition to the headquarters lobby. It was not a statue of a founder or a tribute to financial success. It was a simple bronze plaque engraved with a message every visitor would read before entering the building. The true measure of character is how we treat people when we believe they have nothing to offer us. Employees paused to read those words before beginning another workday, understanding that they represented more than corporate values. They represented a promise earned through humility, accountability, and truth. Zaria quietly looked at the plaque one last time before walking toward the elevators, knowing she had never sought recognition, only fairness. Nathaniel watched her leave with deep respect, understanding that wealth could build magnificent buildings, influence could fill elegant ballrooms, and success could command attention, but only humility could transform a heart. And long after the music faded, the cameras disappeared, and the headlines were replaced by newer stories. The lesson from that extraordinary evening remained unchanged. Never judge a person's worth by the uniform they wear, because the quietest voice in the room may one day become the one that teaches everyone else what real leadership truly means.